foundational and standard process within democracy that cities and states have long practiced, but New York City government has fallen behind. Let New Yorkers decide, and their vote be the final say. That is democracy at work. Now, let's go ahead and dive into our stated agenda in this very, very hot room today. First, we'll vote on the following finance item: a preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brennan, reauthorizing a 40-year Article 5 tax exemption for the preservation of one rent-stabilized building in Councilmember Osei's district. Next, we'll vote on the following land use items: the Landmarks Preservation Commission's designation of the Old Croton Aqueduct Walk as a historic landmark in Councilmember Sanchez's district. The Old Croton Aqueduct Walk is a public walkway on top of the Old Croton Aqueduct, an engineering marvel built in 1842, which brought the first direct water supply to New York City. Upon its completion, the 41-mile-long aqueduct carried 45 million gallons of water daily to the city from a reservoir in Croton, New York. On April 27, 1940, after completing a substantial renovation, the Parks Department opened the Aqueduct Walk as an official public park, and it continues to maintain and upgrade the park to this day. 2118 Avenue U rezoning will facilitate the construction of a new 4-story mixed-use building. It will include approximately 10 housing units, including 3 affordable units and ground-floor commercial retail space in Councilmember Vernikoff's district. 58-75 Queens Midtown Expressway rezoning will facilitate the enlargement of a pre-existing development in Councilmember One's district. 27 through 24 College Park Boulevard. 27-24 College Point Boulevard commercial overlay will facilitate the development of a 1-story commercial building with a drive-through and bring several existing commercial uses into conformance in Councilmember Palladino's district. And Resilient Homes Staten Island, an HPD application for UDAP approval and Article 11 tax exemption to facilitate the construction of 8 two-family homes and 7 one-family homes containing a total of 23 units. The sites, which were a part of the Build It Back program after being ravaged by Hurricane Sandy, will be redeveloped under HPD's Open Door program, creating new homeownership buildings that are affordable to moderate and middle-income households in Councilmember Carr's district. Today, we will also vote on the following pieces of legislation. Resolution 10, sponsored by Councilmember Robert Holden, would recognize July 27 annually as Korean War Veterans Armistice Day in the city of New York to honor the courage and sacrifice of those who served. Resolution 504, sponsored by Councilmember Sandy Nurse, authorizing the Speaker to engage in litigation on behalf of the New York City Council to oppose the Department of Corrections' efforts to suspend Local Law 42 of 2024, which bans solitary confinement in city jails. Introduction 863A, sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan, would require public notice if an actual contract differs from an agency's annual procurement plan in terms of contract length, nature of services, or affected civil service titles and headcount. The bill would also apply these requirements to contract amendments that would increase a contract's value to over $1 million. I now invite Councilmember Brannan to the podium to discuss his legislation.
Thank you, Speaker. There's no need to choose between quick project timelines and strong oversight. We can have both. New York City has the greatest municipal workforce in the world, and we should prioritize value and compensate their labor every time we can. Where we do need outside contractors, we shouldn't settle for anything less than the greatest procurement process in the world. So Intro 863, it threads the needle on a difficult task, adjusting oversight and review rules to bring our city agency contracting process into the 21st century without eroding the protections they afford to city workers. We can and should retain the right to keep a close eye on contracts and their execution, and we can and should improve our guardrails against displacing city workers and contracting out civic projects to the detriment of our taxpayers, as the president of DC 37, Henry Garrido, and I laid out in an op-ed this morning in the Daily News. So this has been a long time coming, and it's nerdy stuff, but it's important stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Resolution 292, sponsored by Councilmember Althea Stevens, calls on the New York City Department of Education to create an inclusive school dress code policy that complies with Title IX of the Federal Education Amendments Act and accounts for diverse cultures, gender expressions, and body diversity. Next, Introduction 118A, sponsored by Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, requires the Department of Education to post dress code policies on its website and report on dress code policies in DOE schools for 5 years, including information about whether each school has a dress code policy and data on dress code violations and penalties broken down by month, week, and student race and gender. I invite Deputy Speaker to discuss her bill.
Are you going to the outing or not?
He's going.
That's the most important question of the day. But good afternoon, everyone. Dress code policies in the DOE vary widely as schools are permitted to adopt individually dress code policies at their own discretion and determine how to relay information about dress code policies to students and families. Despite existing regulations, students and advocates have reported that some school dress codes have unfairly targeted and criminalized LGBTQ+ students and students of color. This was a concern raised by youth advocates as part of the Young Women's Initiative 2.0 to create a more inclusive, non-discriminatory dress code policy. Introduction 118A would require the Department of Education to post their dress code policies on its website and report on it at the DOE schools for 5 years. Right now, the policy exists on a school-by-school basis. By requiring greater transparency, our legislation can help advance anti-discrimination protections that support all students and ensure more consistent standards across our school system. This report would include information about whether each school has a dress code policy and data on dress code violations and penalties broken down by month, week, and student race and gender. Requiring the DOE to make this information available on its website ensures that all dress code policies are easily accessible online. We believe this increased transparency will allow students and families to access individual schools, to assess individual school policies and independently determine whether such schools are implementing non-discriminatory policies and move us towards a fair and inclusive policy. Thank you.
And Introduction 435A, sponsored by Councilmember Pirina Sanchez, would require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to make available rapid testing services for sexually transmitted infections in at least 4 boroughs. DOHMH would be required to determine the locations for such rapid testing services and report to the Council on the considerations that went into making such determinations. DOHMH would also be required to conduct an education campaign to inform communities of the locations and availability of rapid testing services and would be required to report to the Council annually for 3 years on the availability of rapid testing services throughout New York City. I invite Councilmember Sanchez to the podium to discuss her important legislation.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And if any of y'all have seen me today or last night, you know that I am just bubbling about this piece of legislation. Thank you so much for all of your support. It's a big one. It's an expensive bill, but it's so important. I'd also like to acknowledge it's a long list of advocates, so I won't name them all, but I'll call out Caribbean Equality Project, Housing Works, and the Latino Commission on AIDS, who worked so diligently on this piece of legislation. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, racial inequities in sexually transmitted infection rates have skyrocketed, most harshly impacting New Yorkers at the intersection of Black, Latino, low-income, and LGBTQIA communities. In New York City, Black and African American people and Latinx people make up over 80% of new HIV diagnoses in 2022. The Bronx in particular suffers from the highest rate of HIV infection and death across New York State's 62 counties, the highest rate of chlamydia infections, and the second highest rates of gonorrhea in the 5 boroughs. You'd think this translates to services, but it does not. And nationally, Hispanic and Latinx people have seen a 17% increase in HIV infection rates since the beginning of the pandemic. The numbers go on. Yet study after CDC study show that there is less sexual risk behavior among Black and Latino Americans. Nationally, Black and Hispanic people are less likely to practice unsafe sex, unprotected sex. So these horrific inequities that we're calling out are only about education, testing, prevention, and care. That is why the passage of Intro 435 is so important, because by expanding access to rapid STI testing, also known as Quickie Labs, which did make a couple of my colleagues snicker this morning, which is very funny, in partnership with community-based organizations with the ability to reach the most impacted communities, we are taking an essential step in addressing horrific inequities in STI infection rates and investing in the long-term health of the people of New York City. This bill represents a multi-million-dollar investment to expand the number of state-of-the-art rapid STI testing facilities that today are only open in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, and in Chelsea and Manhattan. And it requires an outreach campaign in partnership with organizations that have a proven ability to reach the most impacted New Yorkers. So we're by no means done, but this is a major step in the right direction, and thank you, Speaker, for your leadership.
Great job. That does conclude our stated agenda, and with that, we will take on-topic questions first.
So this is on the resolution 514 authorizing legal action if the city tries to fight the lobbying solitary confinement. So with that resolution, it sounds like the council expects the city to fight the law. Would you say that the council would file its own legal action, or would it join a legal aid case like it did with the housing project?
Well, we would look at both, actually. What this does, though, is it enables the council to go ahead and file our own if and when that opportunity presents itself. Yeah, thank you.
So, hi, Speaker.
Hi.
So just to clarify, it's not that this is a resolution that would start the process of a lawsuit. It would just give you the authority to actually file.
Correct.
Right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yes, Laura. Speaker Adams, in terms of the more expanded dress code options for schools, do you have any sort of anecdotal information that informs this decision? Like how many students have complained about being
Diana.
disciplined, or anything that sort of, other than youth advocates speaking out about this?
I think that that's the point of the bill, is that information doesn't exist, right? So now we have, they're forced to put it on their website, and we'll get regular check-ins and determine whether or not discriminative policies are, in existence.
And in terms of this sort of broader, allowing students to maybe wear more variety of clothes, there's always been that argument, that could distract from studies.
It didn't distract me when I was in school. I wasn't forced to wear a uniform. Listen, I'm a parent. I have children that wear uniforms, and I think that the issue here is not so much the policy, right, around wearing or not wearing uniforms, is that every school has a discretion to kind of make up their own rules as they go along, right? There's no uniform process, and there's no place for you as a parent or as a student to go and look and inform yourself, right, about what each school's practice is, so that you're making an informed decision when you decide whether or not you want to go to school in a particular building. But there have been many incidents where students have been targeted because of the way that they wear their hair, if they identify as, a different sex, and and so we want to make sure that these things are not happening in our public school buildings, and we think that this bill at least will allow the transparency for us to be able to engage more efficiently with the DOE.
And just to follow up to that, has the DOE said that they'd be amenable to working?
They haven't said that they wouldn't be, so yes.
Also on the uniforms, are you kind of leaving it up to schools to report to how they report, or are you asking for specific information? You
No,
can't say people should be clean cut.
I mean, we're not telling them what to do. We want to be better informed about what the policies are, and we would like to see a more uniform policy that runs throughout all of the school districts, so that it's not as arbitrary as it has been, right? Because it leaves a lot to interpretation, and I think that that's kind of what's gotten us into trouble, and where the students find, a bone of contention with the DOE.
And do you have, I guess, a suggestion for? I guess there's also a reso on like an inclusive dress code policy. Do you have a recommendation for like what that would look like, or is there language, or is that also
It's
something that we'll be working on?
no, it's something that we're still working on. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, off topic?
Hi, Speaker.
Hi, Kelly.
I wanted to ask you, obviously, about the Councilwoman Susan Sway. You did put out a statement yesterday. I wanted to know, have you spoken to her? Some people said that she needs to be held accountable accountable for her actions. Do you agree with that? And then I wanted to ask you about the City Fest lawsuit. I believe opening arguments for the lawsuit are coming up at the end of the month. I wanted to see, the mayor lately has been saying that he doesn't want to get into arguments or back and forth with the city council, but this lawsuit is going forward. I wanted your statement or thoughts on that having to file a lawsuit to get the city to expand the voucher program.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's just so important that this law, as put forth by the City Council, goes forward. We have people that are stuck in the system right now, obviously, through many, many different channels, people that are facing eviction and other situations that they're going through. We would continue to press on this issue because it's that critical to folks that need some place to live, to people that are, facing evictions and other things. We need for this system to move. We need for the bottlenecks to get unstuck. So we're going to proceed forward with what we have to do to make sure that the law is in fact enacted.
And then
On Councilmember Zhuang, I have not spoken with her yet. I plan to do so this afternoon.
and about the accountability portion, so people saying she needs to be held accountable for her actions yesterday. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, we did put out a statement yesterday, and I stand by the sentiments that violence is completely unacceptable, and respect for our city workers during their jobs it's just not negotiable. So, I'm not going to, I'm going to refrain on any further comment given the legal processes that are still going forward, as you all know, and to avoid prejudicing any internal processes within the council itself.
Speaker, I wanted to get your reaction earlier this week to campaign finance filings from a couple of competitors, mayor potential competitors in the 2025 election. They're showing some real fundraising potential. Do you know, do you have a sense of if you would support somebody who's running against him?
Oh my goodness, it's still too early, and quite frankly, I'm a little busy, so my interests have been elsewhere lately. As a matter of fact, we're down, we're post-budget discussions and adoption now, so that's been my focal point for a very, very long time. Now, over the next, coming months, I'll be able to focus more on, local elections and other things also. I'm kind of more involved right now in what's going on the federal side. That's more immediate to me.
Katie? Speaker Adams, I wanted to ask you, I know you as the speaker of the whole body, you obviously can't tell all the other members how to act or what to do, but I know what the council member in Brooklyn was protesting against, and she continued to today, and continued to be protesting against homeless shelters. I know homeless shelters in various districts. Back when you were on a community board, it was an issue where you represent. What kind of conversations do you have as a whole in the body about these initiatives, especially for something as sensitive but necessary as a homeless shelter, whether it be for the city's homeless population or migrant shelters? I don't know if there's overall messaging that you try to convey to the body, especially when there's consistent protests about something like this. It's sort of a broader look at why she got herself into the situation in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question, Katie. And as you mentioned, I've had my own, involvement, with shelters, homeless shelters, other shelters, in Southeast Queens as well. There are not necessarily discussions with the body per se, with any conference or another conference. We do have conversations individually between, myself, my senior staff, colleagues will also join in on discussions like that, give personal accounts and advice on how we've handled situations in the past and how perhaps things can be handled in the future. Every situation is different. Every community has a different take on, the provision of shelters in their communities, be that family shelters or single-sex shelters, other shelters being brought in. Every community is different. Every community's capacity, even to accommodate shelters, is different also. So the conversations aren't really on a broad base, but more on an individual basis, and they're still ongoing.
Had you previously, not after yesterday's incident, had you, over the last year, spoken to Councilmember Zhuang about her concerns about the shelter and maybe her expressions against those shelters?
Not the expressions against. I mean, protests are protests. They happen, pretty much on a daily basis in our city as a whole. As far as the shelter itself, it's been, there have been, individual conversations as far as whose district has what, why each district has what. Councilmember Zhuang has only been in the council a very short time. Also, so we keep that in mind as well. So her experience as a council member and her experience as a resident / leader of her community, all those things are now coming together for her. So we take a look at all those pieces, we bring them together, and we see what is going to be. I understand the passion, for working for your constituents. There is a way to work for your constituents, though, and that's pretty much that.
So, the mayor has said he's done fighting, he's putting Nahum on a new foot, he didn't veto the bill. But I see you and the council pressing on advice and consent, pressing on city FEPs, pressing on solitary. Is the mayor trying to, get you to unilaterally disarm, or why do you think, I guess, do you agree that he is also trying to bring peace and leave that stay focused, no distractions around?
You do have a way with words, Jeff. I can't really answer that, for the mayor. I do know that, our work together, I've said this often, our work is compartmentalized because we do have a good relationship one-on-one, speaking, about what we do, how we lead in those things. When we speak about individual issues, though, they tend to be a little bit different in that the way that we speak about advice and consent is different. The way that we spoke about How Many Stops Act was different. The way that we dealt with solitary is different. All of the way that we dealt with the budget, certainly different. So all of those things have been handled very, very differently. Different moods, different attitudes, different all of that stuff. So I don't really, have too much to say as far as the mayor coming out now saying, I'm tired of the back and forth. We're all tired of the back and forth. Nobody ever wanted a back and forth, but things happen in those compartments. So, attitudes change, people change, things change in the midst of those conversations themselves also. So all of those things are very, very fluid. I'm grateful that he said that publicly, that he's tired of the back and forth. That's a great thing to hear. We don't like the back and forth, never have. So we're going to proceed as we always have. Hi.
How are you doing?
Good.
So I was wondering what you thought of the mayor's remarks today about Councilwoman Zhuang. He said he wanted to sit down with her and try to resolve this issue. I mean, what's there to resolve? In terms of like the mayor talking to her, like I'm curious what your interpretation of that is, and I was also curious, if you've given any thought, and if so, kind of like where your head's at in terms of what your plans are, like after you leave the city council.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Oh. I'm still considering, my possibilities. There are many of them, and I'm very grateful there are many of them. So I'm still considering all of that. No. Travel agency. As far as the other part of your question is concerned, though, you bring a very valid question. I honestly don't think that some of my other members would be receiving the same level of grace from the mayor, in a sit-down conversation right now. I really don't. The administration actually asked for, some kind of proceedings to go forward from a colleague of mine who was doing his job in a hearing and questioning someone from the administration. So where was the sit-down there? And now we have a situation which is completely different, that is now going through significant legal channels. So, I don't think the situations have been handled the same way.
Hi, Speaker Adams.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask about a story that my colleague Jacqueline Jeffrey Walensky had today. So her story this morning found that two council members, Councilmember Ressler and yourself, had
actually filled out forms that were filled out.
Only two?
Well, two that we know of.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Just checking.
On your behalf. So I guess my question to you is, what are your security concerns about that, if any, since it kind of appears from what we know at this point that just about anybody can fill out these forms on a council member's behalf?
Are you speaking of the forms?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm speaking about the forms for electeds to communicate.
Oh, the elected official form too. She hasn't filled out a form either. Have you filled out a form? He hasn't filled out a form either. Okay, okay, because you just brought up Councilman Ressler and myself. So you're asking about security. What was
Yeah,
it?
do you have any security concerns about that, since it seems that just about anybody can fill out a form on an elected's behalf? It seems that the sanitation department official, or sanitation department employee filled out a form on your behalf, and obviously that's not.
On my behalf?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Let me find out who that was so I can thank them. We need more of that happening, actually. My thoughts around the form has not changed. The form is red tape and bureaucracy that shouldn't be taking place between elected officials and city agencies and agency heads that we, quite frankly, have been working with and have had great relations with for a very, very long time. I'm not concerned about any security because I don't think the paper is necessary to begin with. So what are we securing? We were told that these papers or this form, this 14-question form, needed to be filled out for some kind of work efficiency on the administration's behalf. That work efficiency has nothing to do with the work of the city council, the work of state electeds, or anyone else. So that should have been an internal process. So I have no concerns over any kind of security measures. Our relationships with our commissioners are still golden, thank goodness, in spite of this red tape that takes place in some of these situations, which should only be happening according to the rules for meetings. That has since morphed into other things, which we don't even know about. So we're going to continue to proceed. Each council member or elected official, statewide, federal, however, whomever interacts with this form will choose to use it or not use it, just as the council members have. Hi. Good.
I was curious if you could shed some light on why the reparations bill was postponed.
Oh, the reparations. Oh, sure. Full transparency. It's because we did not have quorum. We did not have membership present. So it's nothing juicy. Yeah.
Back to Council Member Swan. Have you seen the video, and could you at least tell us your reaction to the video?
I've seen the video. I've seen a few. Aren't there a few posts? Yeah, I've seen a few. My reaction was disturbing, and even more disturbing.
Would you consider any discipline within the body?
That's still to be determined. Again, we've got significant legal processes that are going on right now. We're talking about a number of charges that have been filed against the council member. We've got to, respect that process to go on first. Once all that is hashed out, then we can make our determination how this council will proceed.
So good news. Tomorrow marks the 1-month anniversary of the council having the right from the state to set the city's speed limit at 20 miles an hour instead of 25, which is the default. That's a permission that the state legislature gave after the council passed a home rule resolution asking for it.
Correct.
So obviously we've been told, you don't know as a leader which members of the council might put forward a bill to reduce the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. However, you're the leader, and so I would ask you, do you want such a bill? Is anybody working on such a bill, and will the council reduce the speed limit to a life-saving 20 miles an hour?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for being here today. That is a question that we will take on in conference. The bill is very, very significant to this council, and each council member is going to have to weigh in on how they feel it should be enacted or should not be enacted in their district. So we're going to be taking a look at that. I'm not sure if legislation has already come out. Who's here from Ledge? Nothing has come out yet from a council member pertaining that change.
But would you want to lower the speed limit, you personally in your
generally in my district. That's something for me to discuss with the community in different meetings with civic associations, with block associations, and with community residents.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.